Hello everybody, I'm in the roastery at Mill City Roasters. Some of you might have heard of our new 1.5 kilogram roasting machine, or some of you might have seen on our website 1.5 kilo is now listed on our machine list. And so it's pretty exciting, but I felt like we kind of walk around on what makes this new piece of equipment that's so exciting in our roastery different than previous pieces of equipment, or just different to just general roasters that are out there in the world. So all right, let's do this really quick. So I'm going to cover some of the basics of our coffee roasters, but I think most of you know our coffee roasters quite well at Mill City Roasters. So I think I'm going to focus more on the differences. What makes this 1.5 different than a 1 or a 2, I guess, is one of the things we're thinking about. And why would we do a 1.5? You know, so that's some of the stuff. I'm thinking 1.5 is kind of a nice size. And if you do notice this is on a table. So traditionally in Mill City, we do a 500 gram and a 1 kilogram, 500 gram and a 1 kilogram roaster that are on tables. And then the next size up is 2K and then 3K. And those 2 kilogram, 3 kilogram roasters are actually on carts. And their housing, or like the body itself of the roaster, is on wheels, and they actually can move around. So we kind of made a hybrid between a 2K and a 1K. So now we have a larger capacity roaster. I've roasted up to 165, I want to say, K on this machine. So it's almost up to the 2K size, but it's a tabletop machine, so it's a little bit easier to put into like maybe a roasting space or a lab, you know what I mean? Because you can put it onto a table and you have a lot of control of this roaster, so it could be quite applicable for developing profiles and potentially even sample roasting. So it's got a lot of bandwidth when it comes to usability in the roastery, I would say. Much more than the 1 and much more than the 2 even. So that's one of the things, is just the size kind of puts it in a nice spot for a lot of usability for backsides. And like on all of our roasters, it does have variable drum speed. So you can adjust the drum speed based on your charge to replicate smaller charge roasts in a roaster. So that's super smart, super helpful. Okay, well, I'm just gonna go over the controls. Basically now, what you're seeing here on the 1.5 is the full digital control panel. They started adding these on the 6K and up as of, I think, almost a year and a half ago. So now we're starting to add them on some of the smaller roasters. To basically add some of the controllability and potentially some other kind of data logging / roaster assistance that can come from your software, your laptop, your computer, things like that. There's a lot of things that with this digital control panel could be coming down the pipeline from the software side. So it's really exciting. Now talking about the control panel, we have the temperature controller here, which traditionally was just run via this. So now we actually have it on buttons on the control panel. And just so you know, there's 2 different modes too. There's a warm-up mode setting and then a roast mode setting. So this is a little bit more complicated, but it's a little bit more helpful when it comes to the way the roaster runs the machine. Over here too, we have a new gauge that shows, it says ET. Well, it actually shows ET and IT. So now you have ET and IT thermocouples. They're readouts on the control panel. So if you're not running data logging for some reason, you actually have those temperatures on your control panel to help you manipulate your roast. Timers, the original timers like we've always had on our machines. Now gas pressure right here, this is the gas control. This is gonna basically be the system that you'd use. On the 1K, you'd have a needle valve that you would adjust with your analog kPa gas gauge. So now we have a digital up and down, and it moves in single digits, and that actually will be point of a kPa. So right now, if you look at this, it says 300 is what the gas pressure is being called out to be. That would roughly be 0.3 kPa that would show up on here. And now we have a digital control, so that every time we hit the button, it moves it in increments of 1/10 of a kPa. Super accurate, and it's a little bit easier to replicate roast because you have a very specific fuel setting. You're not trying to dial in a needle valve to a line over here and get to as close as possible. On this thing, it's exactly the same every time. Very helpful. It's a little bit easier to basically replicate profiles with that with this digital control panel. Kind of nice. Exhaust fan speed, we've also changed that. So that's now a digital control panel. It's digital. You control it with these buttons up and down. This reading here is in hertz. So you're going to need to use a lighter trick like we show in a video and like we like to teach in class. But then we also have another airflow gauge. So you're gonna need to use those to kind of come up with some parameters around roast air. You know, what these hertz actually mean, what hertz number means low, what hertz number means medium, what hertz number means static for you if you're running static roast air. Pretty simple stuff. It doesn't take a lot of time or effort to understand the way the hertz affect roast air and what hertz numbers you would use for your low, medium, high, or whatever airflows you're using. So it's really nice and it's easier to replicate. Then we also have drum speed. You're not going to probably manipulate drum speed in the roast, but it's nice to have it right here so you know where you're at. And when you're running variable batch size, you can manipulate your drum speed between batches quite quickly and always have a good drum speed depending on your batch size. What also this is all doing right here is we now have a USB-C connection device. Over here you can't see, or connection port. So now your data logging is going to be connected via USB-C cable. Well, with the digital controls, all those adjustments you make go into your data logging. So that was the big impetus for doing digital control in the beginning, was just so you could log your adjustments. So no longer are roaster operators that are making adjustments on this machine having to log all their adjustments. All their airflow, drum speed, and gas adjustments they make to manipulate a roast are basically getting logged in the data logging automatically. And the USB-C is a connector that actually allows that much kind of data to go back and forth. So it's a pretty high-end data connection, really easy to find connecting cables, and it's actually opening up the avenue for a lot more ability between the computer and the interface. Over here we have kind of the basics that we have on most of our machines, except that now there's a start button. The start button is basically the button that you hit to basically tell the roaster that we're getting ready to start the roaster up. In the past, you didn't have that. It was a power switch, and then you went right to ignition. Now we actually have a start button that we hit, and then you'll hear the motors turn on, and at that point, the solenoid will actually be able to be open when you hit the ignition switch. It's a little bit akin to the emergency stop button, but it's a little bit off. It's more of an operator assistance, and it's something that we use for safety, where the emergency stop is something you're going to use in the moment to stop it. But they're somewhat similar. And then at the end of the roast day, you just kind of turn it off and it slowly slows it down and it shuts everything off. We'll turn it back on, so we are going to fire this roaster up. So now we're kind of walking through here. So now I'm just going to discuss any of the basic differences that we have on this. So one of the things you're going to notice is we're now adding this matte finish to the roasters. It's super nice. Oddly enough, even though it feels a little rough, it's actually much smoother than stainless. And so it doesn't grab grit or dirt as much. So what I'm noticing on these machines is they're staying cleaner. 2 to 3 times as much roasting on these machines show the same amount of buildup as the stainless steel machines, which I did not think. I thought it would be the opposite because it feels a little gritty. But actually, I guess under a microscope, Steve told me it's much smoother than stainless steel. So we have some motors here. They've upgraded the motors on all the machines, including the 1K. So the 1K and the 1.5K now all get these motors. These are much heavier UL listed motors, heavier duty, metal housings, much more robust motors. So for me as a roaster, that's a super exciting point. Both the roast air motor and the cooling fan motor on the 1 and the 1.5K have been much upgraded to higher quality motors. A little easier to clean too. Okay. So I think at this point we're going to just kind of adjust to a different shot, and we're just going to keep talking through the walk around of this machine. All right, so now we're at the front of the roaster. You can see this the matte finish that I was talking about. Very nice. It's clean. Kind of adds a kind of a classiness to the roaster. So something else that's really neat about these new machines is now we have a drum gap adjustment collar added onto all of our machines. Actually a super simple way to adjust drum gap. So you just have to loosen one of these, and there's a ring in there that allows you to twist it and adjust that drum gap. It's super easy. So no longer you having to do set screws and things of that sort, and like tap the drum forward or tap the drum back. Now it's a simple thing of loosening a lock collar and then just twisting a gear to bring the gap forward or back. So it's made drum gap adjustments much easier and much less tool involved. It's pretty much made drum gap adjustment like very layman. I think any roaster operator that has no tool knowledge can still do a simple drum gap adjustment on these machines. Super helpful. So that's really a neat thing. Then over here, we have a new digital airflow gauge that's being added to all the 1.5K machines, all the digital machines. That's an upgrade, and it's pretty neat. And it has a really cool readout because it reads in single digits. So it's much easier to read. for some of you operators that have or have used some of the older analog Magna Helix, those are really solid too, but this is a little bit more accurate, and like I said, it's digital, so now we can track the digital readout from that airflow gauge throughout the roasts. We also, something that I love as a roaster operator that's totally new and only on the 1.5K, is we now have a burner sight glass. Super cool. I know it's not like the biggest deal, but for me, I've always as a roaster wanted to monitor the flame visually. You know what I mean? Because there's a visual aspect of flame and flame health. So now we have a little cutaway and you get a little perfect sight glass into the burner. Not a huge adjustment, but it's the little things that really make roasting better or make you a better roaster. You know, I try to learn the little bits of the craft to get better. So the machine itself also needs to have little improvements to make our craft better. I find that as a little improvement that could have huge upside to our craft. Okay, so we also have the upgraded motors too. Is much larger than the past 1K roast air motors. But then also you might notice that we've now built in, with the 1.5K, you actually get a custom designed ducting kit from the cooling tray, from the roast air fan, ganging in to your cyclone, and then going up in the stack. That's roughly, on all the other roasters, that's actually an add-on that's going to add on a cost to your machine. So the fact that this comes with a full cooling tray and roast air duct setup, custom built to actually optimize roast air and cooling air in your roaster, that's a huge upsell for this machine in my opinion. This one's in teal, so I think we are doing teal, we're doing a green, we're doing a kind of a soft orange, I want to say. So there's some neat, new, exciting colors. White I've seen. I think now it's time to do a roast. So I'm just going to fire the roaster up, and then I'm going to let it warm up a bit, and then we're going to knock out a roast. Hello everybody, welcome back to Mill City Roasters Roastery, and I'm just gonna basically do a quick wrap up on the 1.5K walk around and the 1.5K roast along. So yesterday I did the walk around and then I did a roast, and I didn't explain to anyone or to you all at home what I was actually doing with the roast. And that's kind of like, this is one of the first times I've done that. Usually I like to explain what I'm doing before I roast the roast, and then you all can watch the roast and see what I'm doing. This time I figured I'd kind of do it the opposite. I would do the roast, let you guys watch the roast, and now I'm gonna actually explain what I did. So if you guys saw what I did something a little wacky. So just to be clear, I used a 1K charge on the 1.5K, and that's because I'm working on the development of these coffees, and I'm kind of being experimental with processes, roasting processes on this machine. So I'm running at a smaller charge just so I can get more bites at the apple. I can just run more batches through the roaster without using as much green. So that's part of the reason why I'm running a 1K charge on this machine, or for this process. But what you saw me do actually was I'm trying to like create these scenarios where you can create these really unique pre-blends with utilizing some of the science around coffee seeds, you know what I mean? And so what you saw me do was I used a Pacamara that was natural. So a natural Pacamara from El Salvador. That was 350 grams of my dose. That's a low density, very large natural bean. Now the other 650 grams that you saw me pour in there, you guys might have had a guess at what that coffee was. That was 650 grams of a washed Lemieux coffee from Ethiopia. So, kind of the opposite. A very small bean, not as small as a mocha, which might be the smallest bean that we get as a roaster, but on that small side, one of the smallest beans we ever see as roasters, and that's a washed bean that is high in density. So I basically kind of utilize the two qualities of the seeds being very different to do a pre-blend of those to then create a very complex cup. I've been working on blending naturals and washed in pre-blends to create more complexity because each process has very specific cup qualities, and if you mix them together, then you get the best of both worlds if you can create balance in that. So that's something I've been working on my own for quite a while, pre-blends of washed and naturals, usually East Africans, you know what I mean? So this is just an advancement of that theory, and I'm starting to work in different beans, different bean size, different kinds of densities, things like that. And I really thought that this, Pacamara natural mixed with the washed Lemieux would be a really nice mix to try this experiment with. On top of that, I already had a set profile. So my set profile was basically 5 minutes to dry end, 9:30 for first crack, and then I wanted to do roughly around 150 of development past crack. And I just basically wanted to run the coffee till first crack ended and then drop it right at the end of first crack. So that was my goal for the roast. And this is a pre-blend of coffees that I've roasted singly, but I haven't really roasted the Pacamara much even as a single. So this is a whole new thing for me. You know what I mean? So what ended up happening is I used a 385 charge with a low airflow. I hit my dry end at 515, so just a little bit long. I then increased my airflow to 21. I kept my fuel pretty much static the whole roast or until around crack. Nailed first crack, so first crack happened at 9:30. Let everything just ride as is. At 10 minutes, I lowered the fuel by, let's say, 30%. I went from 1K to 7,700, and then basically I let it ride, and it finished at 1120, 388 BT. So exactly 150 development, everything looked really good. I got a picture of the roasted product for you all to see. Very solid. I was super happy with the roast. I just cupped it. It was really awesome. It's gonna need some rest. This Pacamara needs a little bit more rest than the average bean. So I think in 3 or 4 days it's gonna be epic. But I got butter, red fruit, yellow fruit, very complex on the dry smell. On the wet smell, it was citrus, hibiscus, butterscotch, cotton candy, and then a sweet herbaceousness, which is definitely the Pacamara. On the taste, I got citrus, orange zest, almond, marzipan, toffee, sweet carrot. It was very clean and tart, like very enjoyable. The acid was citric and juicy, kind of round. And like I said, I can tell right now this coffee needs rest. There's a thinness to the body that I didn't expect that I know is gonna come out with rest. And there's also some of the flavors I can tell are kind of trapped as it needs rest to open up fully. But I think the experiment went really well. I'm really happy with the roast. I'm really happy with the cup. I'm gonna keep working on these kind of projects off to the side, just kind of add in odd little bits of information into the world of roasting. But I think this is really fun and really successful attempt at some experimental kind of roasting. So I hope you guys enjoy it.